Arizona PBS is proud to support Indian Country Today. For 6 decades, we've provided television programs and now digital content. But we go beyond that, sending outreach teams across Arizona, offering workshops in language and literacy, family engagement and community outreach, and supporting tribal communities with early learning and school readiness resources. Join us at azpbs.org.
This is Indian Country Today.
It's Labor Day, and we're taking a look at Indigenous people and work. We find folks in unexpected places and careers. I'm Mark Trahant. Stay tuned. It takes money to start a business. Aaliyah Chavez introduces us to a Native American-owned venture capital firm.
After a career as an investment banker, Cameron Newton opened up his own venture capital firm. It was a bold move to make in 2008. Since then, Relevance Ventures is believed to be the only Native-owned independent venture capital firm in the country. Cameron has also expanded to include his brother, Dean, as a partner. Together, they are based out of Nashville, Tennessee. What Relevance Ventures does is find entrepreneurs working on the latest and greatest ideas in the fields of financial technology and health and wellness. If they find a company they like, they provide funding and private equity to get its wheels off the ground.
To be perfectly honest, there are not a lot of Native people engaged in traditional venture capital. We've been trying to elevate this issue once we noticed it. Shame on us for not noticing it sooner, frankly.
They provided initial money to a company called Sunbasket. It is an organic meal delivery service based out of San Jose, California, that now makes $300 million in revenue. So how does Relevance Ventures get the money to invest into companies? They raise it.
And then now, of course, we're on our fourth fund, which is $75 million.
Relevance Ventures says it is now prioritizing later stage investing. Instead of being the first money in, they are now the second, third, or fourth.
My advice is always, hey, if you have that burning desire inside, and entrepreneurs do, and it's hard to extinguish, you really need to let it out.
The brothers are working to reach more companies. So far, they've invested in 16 startups, including Karoo, which allows employers to send curated boxes of snacks and small gifts to their employees. They've also invested in The Good Patch, which are wearable wellness patches that can help people with energy or stress relief. Cameron and Dean say they also hope to meet more Native entrepreneurs to make venture capital and private equity accessible to them. In Albuquerque, Aaliyah Chavez, Indian Country Today.
The introduction of tribal gaming marked a turning point for many tribes. It's been an economic catalyst that has launched interesting enterprises. I sat down with Victor Rocha in Las Vegas at the National Indian Gaming Association trade show. He's the chair of the event and owner of Pachanga.net, a website for all things gaming. I asked him some big picture questions about the industry.
Well, first of all, I think we were all really surprised that the post-pandemic recovery has been so fast. Tribes are doing blockbuster business. I think one of the advantages that the tribes had was the fact that the casinos were really, at one time, the only places that were open. And therefore, they were really the only places that felt normal or brought in a normalcy in the middle of a pandemic. And you could see it during the pandemic, and then after, I think just businesses just shut through the roof. I think everyone was just chomping at the bit to get out and get entertainment, to feel normal. And the tribal casinos offer that in spades. And so it's just incredible. The recovery is just much bigger and faster than we expected.
And there's almost two competing stories. And one of those stories is that tribes were very quick to shut down. Tribes were very quick to keep people on payroll when others were not. And tribes have also done really subtle things like glass cases and really sophisticated ways to say, this is an airborne disease, we're going to deal with it, move on.
And I'd like to add to that, a lot of them went non-smoking, which was, that is, when you're talking about gaming, that's almost, you want smokers, you don't want, it's part of the staples, and for the tribes to go non-smoking, I know my tribe is still non-smoking, and we're talking about keeping it permanent. So, yeah, we had to, we had to protect our people, we have to protect our elders. Our casinos are on our reservations. We're bringing all these people on the res, so it was very important to us to keep our elders safe, and part of that was keeping the environment safe. So it was for our customers, but it was for our elders. It was for our people, So I think that was one of the reasons why we were so quick to respond, because that's where our people are, and our employees, and so.
One of the things I don't think most people recognize as part of the story is that when people think, why gaming? Why should tribes be in gaming? They don't know that there's a 10,000-year history of gaming.
Absolutely, and that is usually, I think we know the dominant culture has a short memory when it comes to stuff like this, but you go to almost any tribe in the country and they have some form of gaming, and it's one of the things we share in common, other than the evictions and all the other stuff, but the fact that we had this entertainment, and gambling is just inherent in who we are, or gaming, gambling, however you want to call it, but it's part of our culture, so.
Life is a gamble.
Life is a gamble, especially when you're Native American, right?
Yeah. I love at your tribal casino, the hand game statue out front. To me, that just warms my heart.
That was Governor Rivera that did that, George Rivera, and it is beautiful. And that's Indian country too. It's a subtle reminder. It's not in your face. It's a way to say, listen, we've been doing it. This is our culture. And if they take the time to learn and look and listen, they will see that these messages are there, right there in front of your face. And just like the statue that's in front of our casino of us playing our traditional games, Pignon, sorry, I said it wrong, Pion.
One of the stories I think of Indian gaming that often should be told more often is about innovation, that you're talking about a culture of innovation.
I think it has to go back to like what I said, not only were we not supposed to be successful, we weren't supposed to be this smart. You know what I mean? People thought that we've always been underestimated, and I still think we are underestimated. And I think gaming is a really good example of people underestimating what we can do, and then showing them, that not only can we do this, we could do it, but we do it better. And actually, what's really amazing, in my work, I get to travel internationally and stuff. I get to travel the world, and it's really amazing to see the narrative starting to change. For the Europeans and Germans and Italians and even the English, we were these poor, impoverished people, and we're, poverty porn for them. You know what I mean? And then when we show up and we're leaders and we're at these successful business, this $34-35 billion industry, that changes the narrative on who and what we are. And in Europe, and I think, believe it or not, I think Americans are coming around too. They're starting to understand that. We know what we're doing. We've created these environments, and it wasn't an accident. It's again and again and again and again. So technology is just another thing that people underestimate just about it. We understand it, we embrace it, and we use it.
I know you do have a pretty significant international presence. Do you see a point when tribal enterprises will be, or maybe they already are, investing in the world?
Absolutely. One of the things that blew my mind when I started doing international travel was I started seeing where the tribes were on the world stage. You look at their casinos, you look at ours, they're like going, hey, listen, we can give you guys some advice. And I've said it in London. I say, hey, anytime you guys come talk to us, we'll show you guys how to build real casinos. And I've said it in Germany, I've said it in Austria, I've said it in Italy, because they don't compare to what we have. We've created, they come over here and their minds are blown. And when you rank the tribes on the global scale, we are at the very top. So already you have Mohegans in South Korea. You have the Hard Rock's going to be opening one in London. They're in the process of doing that. So the tribes have learned not only are they great at gaming, but when you put them on the international stage, they rank at the very top.
Well, one of the things I loved on one of your Instagrams was meeting with a member of parliament, and to me that sent the notion of government to government.
What was ironic about that is when we met with them, it was the 400th anniversary of Pocahontas meeting Parliament. And the irony was not lost on me that the fact that here we were with leaders, and before it was an oddity, and now we were there as leaders. And it was very poignant for me, and I think everyone that was involved with there was also understand the significance of that. And so her memory was there with us. We thought about her, and she could have been there with us. I think she would have been very proud that we've come back not as tourists, but as guests.
Let me talk about Pechanganet and covering the gaming industry and how you approach that.
Well, Pechanga.net is unique from everything else because it's always really about what the dominant culture is saying about us. And so my role has always been to figure out where the next issue is going to come from. And with the dominant culture, it's very important that you keep an eye on them. And especially with gaming, there's a lot of people I don't trust. So Pechanga.net's always been about figuring out what everybody else is saying about us. So what's happening in the New York Times, Washington, all these little papers and stuff like that. So it's a news aggregation service, but that's really the core of what I do, is just to making sure that we understand what people who may or may not be your friends, how they're going to come at us. And so I've always said that, you don't, how can you protect yourself if you don't know which way they're going to attack you? So that's always been I think that's my motivation why I still put in the hours that I do, because I still feel the importance and significance of making sure that we know where the next line of attack is coming from, and it's always coming.
Last question, where do you see this whole industry in 10 years?
I see us owning it. I see tribal gaming getting bigger and stronger, but there are some threats. We have to be careful. Right now, one of the biggest threats is sports betting. And what I mean by that is that there's a lot of new players on the field who don't care about tribal sovereignty, they don't care about exclusivity, they're only thinking about sports betting. And it's not even about sports betting, it's about mobile gaming, and it's about the next generation of gamblers. So the tribes have a really existential fight in front of them. I think they are cut out for it. If this would have happened 20 years ago, we would have been in trouble. But I think right now we are much stronger. We're in a better position to fight off these type of threats. But I think in that same vein, it creates an opportunity for tribes. But they just have to walk this tightrope very, very carefully, because there's people on both ends shaking that line.
Here in Las Vegas, the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and also California, San Diego especially, and other universities are starting to treat gaming seriously as a career option. How do you see it for young people coming into this business?
I had a conversation with the dean of UNLV's hospitality school, and I thought what he said was kind of relates a lot to what we do, which is that once you go into gaming and once you're in this industry, you can find a job anywhere. It's a career. It's not just a job. It's one of those life-changing careers. And the fact that we're native and the fact that we own these businesses creates an incredible opportunity for the next generation of people, young professionals, and we have them. So that's very exciting, that we're not just creating jobs, we're creating careers.
Thank you, Victor Rocha, Chairman of the National Indian Gaming Association Trade Show and publisher of Pechanganet.
Thank you very much, Mark. Great to be here.
That was my interview on the state of Indian gaming with Victor Rocha. When we come back, we meet natives in unexpected places and jobs. Stay with us. An Alaska native scientist is breaking barriers as one of the first Inuit conservation biologists. Caitlin Anawa-Boisel has this profile.
So I guess let's start from the beginning. How did you get involved in this?
There was one particular moment when I was a teenager and we were out in an aluminum boat out on the ocean, and we cut the engine and we're just sitting there, and we have the midnight sun where I come from in Okavik, Alaska, and we had a pod of like 200 beluga whales that came through the region and just hung out with us at the boat. And that is a pretty rare occurrence.
From then on, Victoria's passion for wildlife became her mission. Her goal was simple: to put Indigenous values first.
I come from a whaling village, and whaling is a very important activity for us. But of course, like conservation from a Western standpoint, is very much focused on the preservation of species, the preservation of lands in ways that aren't necessarily conducive to Indigenous peoples. So I wanted to learn about conservation and how we could do it in a way that was more in line with Indigenous values, Inuit values.
Victoria says putting Indigenous people in charge of wildlife should be the foundation.
We also, of course, need Indigenous knowledge, and we need community members who really know the landscape to be making those decisions about how best to conserve lands, species, waters, all kinds of decisions that Indigenous communities, at least in the Arctic, make every day.
But when you put in the hard work, you get to see the payoff.
This is the most progress that we have seen, the most recognition of our rights and sovereignty as Indigenous peoples, as Native peoples, that we've seen since the 70s.
In Oklahoma, Caitlin Anawa Boycell, Indian Country Today.
Indigenous designers and models are taking to the runway all over the world. Karina Dominguez tells us more.
4 Indigenous designers are successfully building their brands. Louis Gong is the founder and CEO of 8th Generation, the first Native-owned company to produce wool blankets.
We work 100% of the time with Native artists who are paid for their work, and we also provide business capacity building for artists that we work with.
Before that, he was customizing shoes and putting on workshops with the help of vans, which assisted him in raising the seed money for 8th Generation. Today, the brand is one of the fastest growing Native-owned companies, but Gong is most proud of the unique merger of art, activism, and business that the company has struck.
I set out to create my own system, to develop a new status quo for how companies might work with cultural artists.
8th Generation has one store in Seattle and another one opening soon in Portland.
I'm so excited about Native entrepreneurship because I think more and more Native people are recognizing that what we bring to the table, the things that we've inherited from our grandmas and grandpas, whether it's our art or the way that we look at the world, is not just valuable beyond the boundaries of our reservations and our communities. It's needed. I'm really proud of the scale that we've achieved.
On the other side of the world, Marie Q. Couture was featured during Milan Fashion Week. Cheryl Creed is an Aboriginal designer from Queensland, Australia. Her first collection made it on a runway less than 5 years ago, and last month, her latest collection reached Italy.
A bunch of my girlfriends were all up at 2 o'clock in the morning, all glammed up, watching the show.
Marie Q. Couture debuted on the Emerging Talents Milan runway in Palazzo Visconti. Creed was the first Indigenous designer to appear on that runway, and she can still hardly believe it.
This collection kind of felt a bit like a community collection because there were so many people involved in pulling the collection together, the raising of the funds. Look, I'm so grateful for all that. It wouldn't have happened. So I've been in the process of thanking everybody, for their input in this. And I wouldn't have been able to get it on my own.
Another Aboriginal designer in Australia is T. DeVal, who's only 14 years old. Her line, T and Bal, features Indigenous-themed clothing.
I feel like a lot of people usually just overlook Indigenous businesses. So for me to be where I am is just crazy. And I think it's really good because I'm also spreading a lot of valuable information about Indigenous people.
Since its conception a few years ago, it's expanded into homeware and accessories. She says the brand is about representing culture.
I was not expecting all of this to just happen.
The teen entrepreneur has some advice for those thinking about starting a new venture.
I think really anything is achievable, no matter who you are, what age, what gender, you can do it.
Rebecca Jarvie agrees that anything is achievable after her brand successfully took off in the middle of the pandemic.
I describe myself as a fourth generation beater and sewer. And what that entails is my great grandma, she taught my grandma how to beat and sew, and my grandma taught my mom how to beat and sew. And I'm currently teaching my son how to beat and sew. So that generational knowledge is passed down in our family through the matriarch side. So I really take pride in sharing that.
After sewing for friends and family, Jarvie started sewing regularly last year to produce as many masks as she could. Her most famous mask went viral on social media, and that helped her gain exposure. Recently, Jarvie teamed up with Airbnb to share Indigenous fashion with a diverse group of people. That helped her overcome her reluctance to talk about herself and the art she produces.
It's not even about selling. It's also too about making connections and meeting people, some days when I don't get an email or nobody reaches out, then I kind of feel sad.
There are many unknowns when launching a business, but as these designers will tell you, just taking the first step is a step in the right direction. In Phoenix, Karina Dominguez, Indian Country Today.
The Arctic is a tough environment, and the Indigenous people who live there find interesting ways to hone their survival skills. Quindrea Yaza reports on the World Eskimo Indian Olympics.
The seal hop is a game of endurance and strength. In this push-up or planking position, the athlete has only knuckles and toes touching the floor. They hop forward as far as possible. This game mimics a seal's movement and is used by hunters trying to get closer to the seals. Kyle Worrell from Juneau, Alaska, hopped over 154 feet, blowing out his competition. He says the sport is based on the skills needed to hunt seals.
The story behind the game is that this was based on a hunting technique to sneak up to seals laying out on the ice floe. And so hunters realized if they simply tried to walk up to a seal, the seal's going to see them come and it's going to dive down back in the ocean, and they're going to lose that opportunity to have a seal to bring home to feed their community.
Welcome to the 60th Annual World Eskimo Indian Olympics, where athletes are excited to get back into competition after having a year off due to the pandemic. Samantha Mogg, like many athletes, participated in more than one event.
I do Eskimo stick pull, Indian stick pull, grease pole walk, and air pull.
Medals are bestowed upon those who show great strength, agility, and persistence. However, the competition is much more than that.
It's called the Olympics or competition, but really it's a celebration of our culture and our people. And so you go to the event and it's healing, and you're constantly running into friends and family, and the sportsmanship is one of the most powerful aspects of the games. Is all the athletes are there supporting each other and holding each other up, no matter your experience levels.
Many Alaska Native families still rely on subsistence living. Kelly Lincoln from Bethel, Alaska, showed physical agility skinning a seal in under 2 minutes and 8 seconds. The ear weight is another popular game. The strength resembles endurance to frostbite. This year's winner was Frank Lane from Kotzebue, Alaska, who made it 503 feet. This premier event originated as a form of communication. When whales or other game were hunted, a messenger ran back within sight of the village and would jump and kick on one or both feet in the air to communicate they were on their way back. In Phoenix, Drea Yazzie, Indian Country Today.
We'll leave you now with this welcoming song from the Indian Relay at Canterbury Park, sponsored by the Shakopee Metawakanton Sioux community in Minnesota. Thank you for watching this special ICT Labor Day edition. For more Indigenous stories, visit IndianCountryToday.com. I'm Mark Trahant.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run. This is Indian Country Today.